Okay, this is going to be a quick video on what I know about glossy card stocks. I've had a lot of questions of late about cardstock and which ones are the best ones to buy for this. The majority of the techniques that I've been using in these videos. Basically, cardstock that we're using is professional offset printing cardstock. It's glossy cardstock. It's typically used for things like covers and postcards. These are some of the recent postcards that we've just received back based on some of the scenes that I've created in these videos. But a lot of times when people do a scene on glossy cardstock, they feel that, or some of the comments have been that it looks like a postcard, and the reason why it probably looks like a postcard, in addition to the saturations and the glossiness of it, is because this paper is the type of cardstock that professional printers are printing these on. So that's the type of paper we're looking for when we're going into this technique. And I say the professional offset printing style of cardstock because this cardstock, it's glossy, and visually it looks like it could be just like any other photo paper that you would buy for, say, a home inkjet printer. But it's not. It's going to be slightly different in terms of the surface and the saturation of the surface. And I'm guessing, the home inkjet printer is probably going to be a little bit more porous, so that when you run, a sheet through your printer, be it an inkjet printer, a laser printer, on a home printer, there's not going to be some kind of drying element in it, or machinery or something like that. So, when it comes out, it doesn't want to be too super wet to the touch. So I'm guessing the surface is probably a little bit more porous, the coating's probably a little bit different, and the dye-based inks are going to react differently to it. And I say that with an asterisk because there's a lot of different papers that are being created all the time, most of which I'm kind of unaware of because I've been using one type of paper for several years when I found one that I really liked. I tend to buy my paper by the ream. Cardstock, glossy cardstock is usually sold in reams of 250 sheets. This one right here is King James Cast Coat, okay? And that was the brand that a lot of people liked several years ago. It is now out of business, unfortunately. But this is how you kind of look at paper and glossy cardstock. There's your local rubber stamp store might sell this type of paper, maybe not the King James type, but this type of glossy cardstock, and it's typically rated at a thickness in terms of, or the rating is in points. Okay, so this one right here says 10 point. Okay. 10 points is a pretty standard thickness, and it's the one that I'm using almost all the time because the King James Cast Coat that I bought, I bought several reams of this. It's all 10 point. And I would say that, if anyone's received any of these postcards from us that we send out in orders, this is probably a 10 point thickness. So that's a pretty standard thickness used on postcards. If you have a choice between that and 12 point, I prefer 12 point, but naturally the 10 point is going to be just cheaper because it's thinner. But the one thing that I like about a thicker paper is, when I lay down all my inks on there, I'm using so much of this, so much ink on it that it's really saturating. And the only thing is that sometimes when these dry, it just curls up a little bit. It doesn't really matter too much, but because if I'm going to mount it on a card or something like that, I'm using adhesive tape or photo stickers on the back of it, and it goes flat anyway. But if you have a thicker one, it just stays, more stiff and you won't get that kind of curling there. But like I said, I do all of mine on 10 point, okay? So 10 point is the thickness. Now when you see this C1 right here, right next to it, that's a C1 if you can read that. C1 means that it's a single-sided glossy coating, okay? If you're using glossy paper, there's glossy paper, there's coated paper that's not glossy as well. But C1 means single-sided glossy. If it says C2, both sides are glossy. Now, there might be certain applications for having double-sided glossy paper. I usually don't stamp on two sides. You might do a card and you can fold it and you can stamp on the inside as well, on a glossy surface if that's what you want. But I've had double-sided glossy papers in the past and I've really liked it as well. Again, it's because it's due to the stiffness factor. But that double-sided glossy is a lot more expensive, and usually I don't care about the back of my cards anyways. Now these are printed postcards, okay? Not the originals. But sometimes people like to do things on the back, and I don't know, that's where you would have a double-sided glossy at times. Here's another type of glossy paper. A former client of mine in Australia went with this brand called Pace Setter Cast Coated, and this is a 500 sheet ream. I have no idea the thickness of it. It feels like a 10 point to me. But one of the really nice things about this paper, I was told it came from Indonesia, but it had probably a thicker coating of glossy coat than, say, the King James. But it was beautiful to stamp on, okay? But the thing is that if it's really super saturated in terms of the coating on top, it's sealed off the top so much that when I put with several coats, or maybe up to, say, 4 or 5 coats of ink on it, I'd be inking it up and going over it. By the time I got to that 3rd or 4th ink, it felt like a lot of it was floating on the surface, okay? And which is fine. Everything was blending really nicely, but it was hard to apply more coats of ink on the top because there was so much moisture kind of floating on the surface of the paper that I couldn't get some of my other colors to stick. And also what happened was if I took and I laid down a lot of inks like this or something, and let's say I left the end to stamp these foreground images over the top of it, if it was kind of still moist on the top, sometimes what I found with these images the next day is they might kind of run a little bit, because it was so moist. So if I'm stamping moist into moist, the surface is still a little wet, so I'm stamping this image, and it looked crisp when I first stamped it out, but by the next day it might kind of run a little bit, and it wasn't quite as crisp. I wouldn't say it was blurry, but it just wasn't as crisp. Now, I can't do anything about the oversaturation, where I couldn't apply more inks, but I could have let it dry a little bit or heat set it, but I usually don't like to do that during the process. It just takes some time, and I just like to just keep working on a card. But if I stamped out those images in there, what I can always do is I can go back and spray seal it before I let it set and dry overnight, okay? So that's one way to get around that factor if you're using some paper that seems like it's so coated and you're having problems with it kind of running a little bit towards the end. Okay, so that was that paper. Now, because King James is no longer available, and that other paper's from Australia. Maybe if you're in Australia, you can get that Pace Setter, or maybe there's some other types of paper. This is Kromecote here, and Kromecote was the one that I had been using for many years. It's the one that we were using at a Stamp in the Hand when I used to work for them, and it was pretty much the standard for a long time, okay? This is Kromecote with a K and K-O-T-E. and it's cast coated. Let me see. Okay, I didn't even know. This one is the double-sided one right here. So it says cast coated 2 sides. Generally it would be noted as a CS2 these days. Okay, now here's the thing. I guess Champion is the brand. Usually if I look it up on the internet or something like that, I can look up Kromecote and it's there. I don't know if you'll see Kromecote 2000, but I think Kromecote might be called something different now. I'm not even quite sure. I tried to research it about a year ago and looked at several different sites, and I thought it might be called a Mohawk paper, but I'm not sure again. So, but anyways, Kromecote goes back to you know, a paper that we've been using in the industry for many, many years now, and that was always some pretty good paper. Oh, this is 12-point double-sided, so I bought this years ago. Packaging would probably look completely different now. I probably bought this 20 years ago. But it's still available out there. I'll put this in the notes section. And okay, now this is the thing that we found when I was trying to give this other customers as much information as I could. I did some research of my own, and I found some different places out there. If you don't have like a local stamp store that carries, or craft store that carries a glossy paper that you like, a customer ordered some Kromecote from one company, and they ordered it from another company, okay? And it's both called Kromecote. It was both 10-point, single-sided, okay? But they told me that the papers were vastly different. So what I've come to understand is there's a Kromecote that's for kind of inkjet or laser home printers, and then there's also the standard Kromecote that's been around for a much longer time before kind of inkjet home printing, okay? And again, this is like for the professional offset style of printing, okay? And I didn't ask, but I'm guessing that the one that was for the home inkjet one was the one that this customer didn't prefer as much. I think it was the offset style. Offset is when, you know, you have a printer and they're using like a 4 or 5 color printing, you know, large printing press process, okay? But anyways, I'll put in the notes section where you can get some of that still if you, like I said, if you don't have some local supplier that you can get it from. So anyway, so that's what I know of papers right now. If anyone has any other advice to everyone else, go ahead and put it in the notes section of this video, and let us know what you think. So anyways, Kromecote's still out there. Like I said, it could have changed brands, but I'll put the supplier's name of that I know still carries it. Or if you are a supplier and retailer of Glossy Card Stock, and you want to put your information down in the notes section, by all means do that as well. Okay? So anyways, not as informative as I would hope that this video would be, but paper companies have changed a lot over the last 10 years or so, I would say. You know, some went out of business, some have been acquired, and names changed, and I know that some people told me that even like the Kromecote, whatever chemistry or recipe has changed. I don't think for the worse, you know, but I really don't know. So, I don't know if anyone else has any other types of information about that. Let us know. Okay? Thanks for watching.